Okay, hey everybody, Faraday here. So today we're going to start the podcast, this limited hangout, and today my guests are Jreg, Zanzee, and Logo. So I'll just go around and let them all introduce themselves. Jreg, do you want to start?
Well, it's pronounced Jgeg, actually. Yeah, my name is Jreg. I'm a anti-centrist. I forget why I'm here, but yeah, once I figure it out, I'm sure we'll really create some productive discourse.
Okay, Zan.
Hey, I'm Zanzee. I'm a speedrunner who talks about Marxism. There's a grand total of one of us, so you won't be hard to find me.
And Logo.
I'm Logo. I run the Read Books Unlimited podcast. I guess I would call myself a communist today. And to spin on that, I'm a Marxist who talks about speed running.
Huh. Wow, you really
Well,
doubled up.
someone who dabbles in accelerationism, speed running. That's not so
Very
bad.
fitting. Very
Very
fitting.
fitting. Very fitting.
Yeah.
So I thought I wanted to, I thought I'd start out the podcast because I got thrown into the public spotlight because my dumbass made a YouTube video to try to explain to people how you fall down the alt right pipeline, for which I got called a Jew and an agent of Mossad and all sorts of names, and then my dumbass, secondly after that, decided that I was going to agree to talk to the New York Times and a bunch of other journalists. um, I like Logo's
Bad
face.
move. Bad
Yeah,
move, man.
good. The best thing I ever did and worst thing I ever did. Um, and so that's how I'm here. So my audience will know that. And I've spent the past 2 years now, basically trying to figure out what the hell's going on and why are people radicalizing. And I've looked into all of it from QAnon to the alt right to you know weird milieus just all over the spectrum. And I'm pretty concerned about it. I think we're in like a historical moment right now. I don't think that this is all just propaganda, as the New York Times might try to call it, or it's just you can boil it down to one variable. And so I thought I'd get like kind of a range of views here to explore the topic. So the topic is, why are young people radicalizing in the West? And we can basically go anywhere y'all want with this. We don't have to stick with just the far right, because as you guys know, there's tons of different extremist subcultures for people to explore these days. But I guess I'll just open it up with a question, and we'll just go around here. Um, what framework do you think we should talk about radicalization in? Does anybody have anything they want to offer up? Like, how would you even describe radicalization, and how is it?
I'm kind of like I understand your framing of like saying like this is sort of new, but in my opinion, like this is how it's just always been. It's become more noticeable just because of the way the internet works, where like these sort of like small communities that pretty much have always existed in America are more they're like running into each other more. They're all placed in like the same pin like place on social media. Whereas like all of this weird stuff, like you talk about like far right websites, blah 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 blah, or like far left websites, blah 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 blah. All that existed in the earlier form of like the internet media ecology. Never mind the fact that like America's been littered with like cults and various communes of all its different sorts for centuries. That's sort of like what this country's always been made up of, is like radical utopians and weird like far right guys and like everything you can possibly imagine. It's a total like carnival-esque sort of country. This was true in the 19th century, the 17th century, like anytime you go look at it. So I think it's more like if there's anything unique about it right now, it's just that it's like all these older forms are becoming more like mass distributed. So for instance, like to be a part of like a theosophical society, like to be inducted into like, the AMORC or like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or, the Freemasons or whatever, you used to actually have to go to a place. But now, like, everyone is running their own little, like, secret society lodge. Like, any Discord server effectively functions the same way. as these sort of secret society fraternities did in like the 19th century, even the early 20th century. So instead of going to like your Elk Lodge or your like Woodsman of America Lodge like you would have in the 1950s, you go to like Reddit, or you go to your Facebook groups, or you go to Discord, and that's the only real difference.
Okay. Don, do you think it's any different today?
All that's different is the landscape, I guess. Everything that Logo talked about is exactly that. It's that humans fundamentally aren't really that different than we were a century, a millennia, and a couple of millennia ago. All this changes our relationship to the actual world around us as we've technologically changed how we interact with the world itself. Speaking off of what that said, there's an anthropologist called Scott Altron who I was looking into about this idea, and he said something very, very succinctly. And he what he does is he actively like studies conflict resolution, and he was on the ground collecting data during the movement in the Middle East for ISIS. And he said that never before in human history has so few people with so little resources inflicted so much fear upon the world. And he fundamentally put it down to their ability to exist in virtual spaces. Social media and technology has just fundamentally changed the way radicalization works in society.
Jreg, do you have any thoughts on how like the technology is shaping all this? Because that's what I've been kind of interested with your content the most. Is you kind of have this like interesting approach where you just explore all the different subcultures of what's going on. So do you have any insight on how technology is shaping this and how the internet's shaping this?
Yeah, basically, radicalization wasn't a thing before me, so everyone was pretty much, they believed the same stuff. Then I came around, so yeah, it was basically just it was all me.
So you were the one that started all this.
Yeah. If you look through the history books, I mean, like these guys clearly they know some history, but you know what they say about history? It's all fake. And a couple years ago, yeah, I just made everybody radical. Yeah.
You kind of have introduced a lot of ideas to a lot of people. I spent some time in the researcher community, and a lot of them have been like, they kind of look at Jreg and they're like, what is his position? I can't tell. It kind of susses them out, but I'm kind of here for it. I'm here for it. I think the schizopolitics arc is great. So I don't know. I do think that there is something a bit unique in that like people can go online now and so easily jump into these milieus. Like I've spent some time on Discord talking to these kids, and I don't know if there would have been a time in history where I would have been talking to a 17-year-old and him and his buddy would tell me, we went from being centrist to fascist, then we became tankies, then we became fascists again, then we became amprims, then we became fascists again, and now we're just kind of like sock dems. And I'm like, so how fast did that happen? They're like, oh, that was like last year. And
Yeah.
it's
Well, you would actually see this, but it's just that it's like the same sort of it's all nonsense. Like, what did they actually do? Like, they started watching different YouTube videos, and like maybe read like one or two different books than like whatever. So like this is like being like, oh yeah, like I went from being like a mod kid to being a greaser to being a punk kid to being a heavy hair metal kid to now I'm really into hip hop. Like it's just like what are they like what has actually changed in their real lives, like how they present themselves in virtual space. That's it. Like they haven't done anything. Like what like these kids
yeah.
probably don't even they can't even vote, right? So all they're doing is talking about their different fashion decisions. They're like, man, like last year my Facebook likes were X, Y, and Z, and now it's not like I don't take it that seriously when people are talking about their deeply held like political positions that they hold solely in virtual reality.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I felt too. And that's why I wonder like how much are these virtual identities? Like how much should we look at it as this is like actual politics occurring? And how much is it just these like saying something more about virtual identities online? So I mean that's why I like Jerry, what I like about your approach is I don't know, you kind of expose that through your work. Do you feel like what is that like for you when you're going through all those different identities online and you're exploring those? Because I don't know if I'm gonna get a serious answer out of you, but I feel like you
Well,
do to
look,
some degree actually explore
we all
those.
laugh. We all laugh at the kids now. And then, 10 years from now, you're going to have a Nazbol takeover and you're like, what the fuck happened? It's these kids. Every time they change their profile picture on Twitter, a whole new policy proposal is just brewing in the works. Give it another 10 years. You'll see. You'll all see.
I don't know. John, do you have anything to add?
What worries me is politics as aesthetic, because like the majority of Marxism that I've read is his early works, like Intro to Critique of Hegel's Philosophy, right? Shit like that, and like Thesis and Feuerbach. And so one of the key aspects that I really try to get across to people is your politics are what you do, not what you are. That is such a key aspect. So when somebody like the idea you gave me a while ago, where it's like within a year I went through all these different things, the question I'd ask them is, what impact did you have on the world? Because if you had none, then you don't actually have politics. What you have is the politics of the status quo, which basically means nothing has changed. And a key aspect of how this comes in is that I fundamentally think radicalization takes place between two concepts, and it's between identity and ideology. And it's when these two things can exist harmoniously with each other. Now, as a Marxist, I'll say they never really do. I have to get into a liberal theory of ideology to have this conversation. Otherwise, I don't want to bore you all with Althusser and Gramsci. But these two ideas can kind of live with each other. But it's when a sense of identity gets very porous, you start identifying with kind of like group ideas, collective ideas, and you start like identifying with things outside of yourself. And I think that's where radicalization becomes dangerous, because you lose a sense of yourself and you start identifying with the window dressing as opposed to the thing the window dressing is trying to sell.
Yeah, just to add to that, the using group identity to lose yourself is great when you don't like yourself. And as somebody who doesn't like myself, I love group identity. I will follow whatever group is close by simply because I lack community. And if they tell me to kill someone, for those of you listening at home, I'm shrugging my shoulders as to indicate that I wouldn't mind.
In Minecraft, of course. Well, I don't know. Moving on.
Yeah, I think it's like just it's the commodification of like identity, really, because like what is all of this? Like you're creating like new like groups that you can like advertise to, like like I like we could see like really easily how like all of the sort of like you could call them like far right memes or whatever, but they're really just like libertarian memes. All of this stuff is like perfectly, except like Taco Bell's brand rehaul makes it look like fucking Miami Vice Fash Wave, like synth punk stuff. Like this is like all this the aestheticization of politics or whatever. All of this does is serve like more and more the like it's like becomes totally meaningless because it doesn't have any real impact or action in the world. What it is fashion. So like if we turn politics solely into fashion, which is pretty much what has happened, then you know everyone's got to start selling their own t-shirts. So you can buy different t-shirts. You can buy your Sock Dem t-shirt, or your you can buy t-shirts with a Sonnen Rand on them now, or a Sonnen Rand and Garfield on them.
Oh man, that's great. I gotta write that down.
Who knows? Because then who knows? Yeah, exactly. That's great merch. You could sell a lot.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So
yeah.
So like that's all it really is. Like it's a expression of like people's everyone's like sort of lost in this immediate circumstance because the internet is hell on earth. Like then it's really like refashioning the world into hell. And so yeah, you get a bunch of different people chasing different blank banners. It's all idolatry. Like it's as you were saying, like this alienation. It's a fundamentally like even Marx's theory of ideology comes from like the like sort of Protestant reformers' critiques of idolatry, and that's what this is people make idols out of various things. But my point really is that it's not really radicalization, because like what are like the touchstones of like if we go with just the far right people, like oh they're really reading these dangerous writers like Nietzsche, who's you forced to read in every college in America. He's like one of the only writers that anyone reads because he's so widely prescribed. So it's like, is that really that radical to be reading Nietzsche? Because the leftists are reading Nietzsche too, and like everyone's pretty much a Nietzschean in America. So is that really that radical? It doesn't really seem so to me. It seems more like pretty conformist. Or I had this great kerfuffle on Twitter over calling Evola a theosophist. But Evola sold by Simon and Schuster, like Evola books are been in print they've never been taken out of print, and they're sold in like crystal healing therapy shops. New Agers were reading Evola. It's not this radical like secret knowledge or anything. The real secret knowledge is just like standard stuff like reading Shakespeare. No one reads Shakespeare anymore. Everyone's reading Nietzsche and Evola and, you know, like fucking people on Twitter and bloggers and watching YouTubers and things like this. But no one's actually doing the work of trying to like put together a more coherent, wider worldview, like an absolute worldview, informed by the record or the canon of all the great works of mankind. You know, like
Well, do you
if you're on the left, you go with Noam Chomsky, right? You can go with Noam Chomsky or like any of the other like sort of popular people, but like it's not like people are doing real work. It's just dividing into like digital tribes, which are fundamentally just consumer demographics that are analyzed by like network topographers, and then you can have targeted ads to specific demographics because everyone gives away so much information about their desires.
Well, do you think that, like, do you think that reading something like Evola would have been a radical act at one point, or is it simply like the mode that people are reading this stuff?
I don't think it's radical at all. I think that like really there's just there's a sense in which like the progressives, like progressive liberals, like sort of closer to like democratic socialists and things like that, they really did like take over the institutions. This was like from like the New Deal onward. Like we have had American socialism, in my opinion, for like over 100 years. Like we have a form of market socialism. It's really shitty. Like I hate it. Like I'm a big critic of it. So I wouldn't really call myself a socialist. That's why I'd prefer to call myself a communist. But I don't think it's that radical. I mean, the Grateful Dead guys were reading Evola. You know, like the guys who like created the internet were like reading Evola. It's not alien or foreign to this situation. It's actually like directly part of it. You know,
So
like yeah.
you think we really are in this kind of like safe holding chamber of like what's considered radical, and those are the edges that you're allowed to bounce up against.
I would say when we closed all the insane asylums,
Mhm.
so we found a way to turn the internet is an insane asylum, and people surveil each other, and they categorize each other for their various like you know ideological problems or whatever, and that like it's really impossible to organize anything because you have like weaponized mental illness basically, of people who are like deputizing themselves as like the internet police force, and
Very based.
I guess, yeah. It's not that fun to be on the receiving end of it, but you know,
And then I'd
that's how it
suggest you
goes.
get a mental illness and you join the firing squad.
I mean, maybe I feel like I sort of like overcame like a sort of internet-induced psychosis over the last like 5 years because as like I've felt more like coherence in my thought and things
Mm-hmm.
as I've gone through it. It's sort of like I do feel like Dante, right? Like I've gone through the entirety of hell, and I'm more of like a purgatorial person at this point. But
Right.
I understand the hell of the internet like perfectly well. Like I totally understand it, and it is hell. Like the internet is hell. Everyone on the internet is damned.
I think one of the key differences between Twitter and asylums is people in asylums don't want to be there.
Everyone hates Twitter on Twitter. I don't know if you're aware of that, but no one
they're
likes
still there. They're still there. Like humans are rational subjects. We act predictably.
I don't think we're rational subjects. I disagree
Well,
with that.
we're predict. When I say rational, I mean we're predictable. I can predict what people will do. Like you are going to eat at some point today, and then you will sleep later. One of the key things I think
I'm
the conversation is
fasting
missing
today,
is
so.
Jay, no one can predict you, Jreg. Okay,
I'm on a fast actually.
Go ahead,
days
Zan.
are a social construct. We're just a rock hurtling around the solar system. At some point, your mouth will open and food will go inside. But like one of the key things that I think this conversation needs is identifying the. I think Logos touched on it in a way that radical and radicalization is a very messy term because it's very difficult to actually find a coherent definition of it that doesn't change. When the best one I can find is ideas that are abrasive to hegemony. That is the best definition of radical that I can find. But one of the key aspects is that radicalization as a process, it's never really like oh, my radicalization is completed. I have reached 100% in the progress bar. It's a progressive movement between layers in society as you slowly move deeper into a social system. That is one of the key aspects behind that. And there's There's a sense of mysticism behind it sometimes, in terms of how, like, we've gotten at these societies, the deeper in you go, the more they feel like they have access to the truth trademark. And there's, for life, I just can't remember what it's called, but Gnosticism, I think it's like, where there's the sense of like that we have figured out what the world is, when one of the things that I think unites pretty much everyone is we've no fucking clue what's happening. And that is a principal source of that alienation, where you have people, like I mentioned earlier, when you have a porous identity and you don't know what to attach yourself to, you have a very shaky sense of self, and you're in kind of like a transitional period of like rites of passage, trying to figure out who, what, and where you are. These groups will come to you and say, we have it figured out, follow me, I'll take you through a trial to find out if you're worthy. And that's very appealing to people.
God, that's all I want. Someone to say, I've figured it out, follow my path.
Well, and see, so I had this I had a mental breakdown like a couple months ago when I was like banging my head against the wall trying to figure this stuff out. And I kind of had this theory that like the political spectrum, that compass, that goofy dumb compass that everybody likes to fill out and put themselves on, it's all fake.
Yeah, it is. That's a construct. That's like you could call that thing itself the Overton window, right?
Yes.
You could call that the Overton window, because that's not real politics. That's like presentation. That's like appearances. And
mentioning
liberal
the
asshole
compass. Yeah, mentioning the political compass in front of Marxists is like pictures taken moments before disaster.
Yeah, well, that really is like the liberal world picture. It's literally a Cartesian grid. Like it's so funny. Like, but like, yeah, if your views are on the political compass, you're in hell. And the political compass is hell.
The only problem with the political compass is that it's only 2-dimensional. If it had 98 more dimensions, we'd be able to plot basically everybody onto it. So
see, as a
is that a political compass or is that a mental illness compass? Because I can't tell.
Mental illness is only one of the axes. How many?
Okay.
Yeah, more the better.
But I do. I had that kind of realization. I was like, that political compass, and I like how you put it, Logo, that it's kind of this like big liberal framework, but it's like the Matrix, and you just get to create your little character, plot in somewhere.
It is a matrix.
But
by definition,
go off of that thing though. Like, have a position that's not like mapped on there. Everybody turns against you like you're in Inception, like you're in the dream. Yeah. They all look at you and they all start like wanting to come stab you. Like, what's he doing? We have to destroy him. Like, all the antibodies activate, and I really am wondering, like, to how much degree, and bouncing off what Zan said, all these different political and ideology cults, they're just limited hangouts. There's these little holding chambers that just keep you from actually going to what could be considered a radical position and actually criticizing like the status quo and what we're inside of. But when
criticizing that is the real radicalism, right? Like,
right.
So I would say that like the real radicalism is when you're beyond those sorts of like political tribal things, because that's like that's all fake. Like, that's all of the realm of appearances. Like, it's literally just like fucking vidya in the like Buddhist sense or whatever. It's just nonsense. It's all idolatry. It's all fake. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just circular. It's a negative infinity. It's the unhappy consciousness. It's hell. I can say it over and over again, but like I want to impress here that this is hell, and you can leave hell. You don't have to subject yourself to hell. You don't have to put yourself on the matrix and be like, I'm going to conform all of my thoughts to this rubric that has been provided to me. Like, that's
just a suggestion thing. If you're in the 9th circle of hell and you have a shovel, you can see if there's a 10th circle. Just keep digging.
well actually, Jreg, to get to purgatory you have to go all the way through hell, of course, because that's what Dante does, because at the very bottom of hell is actually the hole that leads to purgatory. So you're actually closer to God.
I thought he just like jumped on a trampoline or something.
Well, was he literally fucking climbs up the devil to get out. It's weird.
Yeah, he reverses the gravity of the cosmos. That's how it works.
Oh, that's fun. It's been about 4 years since I've read the Divine Comedy. But it's one of the aspects as well, and this is that one thing that's incredibly frustrating to me, because like I'm an Irish Marxist, so I live in Europe land. And the political compass, 9 times out of 10, when I see it being used, almost entirely has within it a liberal American framing. When I would like to ask people, where does the loyalist paramilitary squads in the north of Ireland fall on that political compass? Because if you can find them, well done, you're aware of them. but it requires you to ask a more serious question. That's how the fuck did they get there? And that again reaches into the topic of the idea of like, how do people get to the position where they're willing to go into the most absurd of absurdities, and that's they're willing to kill themselves for other people. It's Thomas Hobbes and Leviathan put it perfectly, where it's like the privilege of absurdity is that humans are able to just be something that nobody else is, and that's totally absurd.
Yeah, it's the divine comedy, man.
We're living it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point of Dante's, right? Is that that is what his picture of a like phenomenological reality. Like it's
I read
it's
the
an
Divine
it's
Comedy. I didn't laugh a single time.
Oh, really? You didn't read it right? It's hilarious. All the popes in hell. It's great.
I like what we said about the internet being like a psychosis machine. I think that's true.
It absolutely is. I think it was designed as such. Like it's designed to do that. Have you guys read Psychopolitics? I just recommend this book all the time. Byung-Chul Han. Yeah, I'd just recommend reading Psychopolitics. It's probably it definitely was like when I finally got around to reading it, I was like, oh, okay, right. Like it's very clarifying as to how yeah. I just highly recommend that book. I'm not going to give like a précis for it or whatever, but it shows the ways in which like psychosis is good for markets. You know, like the market is itself like a form of psychosis. Like you want people like very instrumentalized to react like in a like Pavlovian conditioning in a way to this like cybernetic system of control. I mean, the real radicalization is like learning about cybernetics and like the actual like story of World War II. But I think the real problem, right, when we talk about radicalization, is people have this totally fictitious portrait of what happened in the 20th century, and it was created like as consolidation propaganda after
Yeah.
the war to like provide like a legible story for the creation of like the UN and like the global market and things like this. But it's a total farce. Like it's a complete fabrication. It's not connected in any way to the reality of what World War II really was, or like why it happened, or why people were involved in it. But and that's why like you know having like the Nazis as like this like perfect scapegoat is that's what gives them like the charge for people to want to become Nazis, like neo Nazis, is because like they don't like the global market system, and they're told their whole lives that if you don't like the global market system, like if you think the UN is bad, if you think that all of these things are bad, then you either have to be a communist or a Nazi. And they go, well, in my like my understanding of communists are all these like anarchists, or all these like you know edgy like social democrats or whatever, who are like, yeah, we like who take like the negative depiction of communism, and they affirm that, so they go like, yes, I do want to kill a ton of people. You know what I mean? Like they're like, I get to do that because I'm a communist, and I want to take all of your property. You know, things like that. And so obviously people don't like those either. So they're like, okay, so I have like three choices. I can either be like a Stalinist, which is bad, because Stalin was like Satan on earth or whatever. He killed more people than Hitler, don't you know? Or you can be a liberal. You can like Winston Churchill and all of those guys. Not many people go this path, but that's like the normative path. Most people are. This is like the standard. Or you can be like, actually, what if the Nazis were right? You know, and more people are going to be taking that option. The more that you have people who call themselves communists who are saying, you know, like white settler colonialists, aka like the majority of the population in America, they have to just be like exterminated basically. So like that is what like this edgy social democrats and things do say. Like they are saying that like effectively middle American like you know peasants, frankly, um, they're refuse and they have to be re-educated or destroyed. And we're the like true progressive class because we went to university and we have social science degrees, and we're going to lead the future socialist America or whatever. And that means crushing these people into the dirt. And if you're one of those people, right? Like I grew up like Rust Belt America. Like I'm from a small town. I'm like a working class guy, you know. Like I don't have any noble heritage aside from Michael Collins, who I thought I would shout out because we got an Irishman on here. But like I saw this happen to people I grew up with, right? They don't like what communism is represented to be, because what that is the Democratic Party, basically, right? Like it's like, what does communism mean to most people today? It means like AOC being like the chief commissar of and sending you to the re-education camps. So obviously people don't want that. They don't like the idea of that, and they don't. They, instead of like reading more and being like, maybe this entire frame of like what happened in the 20th century is like not correct, They just go like, I'm gonna be an esoteric Hitlerist. Like Hitler was actually good, and whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's the trajectory. I've got the same background as you, Logo. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and I can't say that I see most of those guys going into, really extreme stuff, but they're all at the very least like these hardcore Trumpers who hate, as you say, hate communism, and they think it's all like about wanting to
Yeah.
get rid of Whitey, and
There's like a real irony to that, because in my opinion, right, like if you were like, what do we call, like, okay, I do believe China is like a communist state, like, or at least they're attempting to create communism. What do they call themselves? They call themselves the People's Republic. So you could say that they're populist Republicans, right? Like that is what communism is populist republicanism. It's not social democracy. Like social democrats were always the enemy of communists. Like social democrats are where the Nazis actually emerged from in Germany. They were the ones who were like against the Comintern. They were the Trotskyites and whatnot. So that's like a more accurate way of looking at it. If there is a communism in America, it's going to be one that appeals to like who you would call the Trumpers or whatever, right?
Well,
because these are like the people. This is the folk, right?
Just for the audience, can you, Zom, for you piping, can you just explain what you mean by populist republicanism?
Yeah, so I believe like a republic is not a democracy. A republic is like a form of democracy, but it's not a direct democracy. Like in a republic, as in China, they don't vote for the president, right? Like they didn't, like Xi Jinping wasn't voted in by a mass election. Their electoral system is much closer to the original electoral system we had until Woodrow Wilson changed it about 100 years ago, where there wasn't direct election of senators and there wasn't direct election of all these things. What there was you were very deeply involved in your local community and your local representatives, and that was your primary political base, was the township, right? This is like even how it worked in like early American colonies. So that was what a republic was, because you were deeply involved in the governance of your local community. And then you would elect a representative from your local community to represent your local community at the next level of representation. And then amongst that set of representatives, they would elect a representative for the state. So it was like it was a set of elections using people's like immediate local understandings to build intelligence that way, as opposed to everyone supposed to have now an opinion on national like policy of a globe spanning empire. And that's insanity, because you can't expect the public, like every single person in the world, to be educated on geopolitics and like the interests of like the entire world. And that's how people posit themselves now politically. They don't go like, my immediate political affiliation is with the people that I live within, like next to in a community. Everyone's totally atomized. And so their immediate political like vision is their relationship to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you don't have a relationship to the world. Your relationship to the world is mediated through your immediate local situation. So like that's where politics happens, is in your immediate local vicinity. But if you're like someone who thinks that politics happens based on who you're voting for in the larger elections, I mean, most people only vote for the president, right? Like if that's your primary political association, is voting for the president, like you don't have a real political reality. Like you live in a delusion where your opinion on who's going to be the president is your first question politically, when that doesn't make any sense. Your question should be like, who the fuck is running my town? Like,
yeah. We go back to the hyper reality, go back into the identity crafting, the big alternate reality game of politics, and away from like. Don, you wanted to say something?
One thing I want to further expand and clarify upon what Logo was saying, because like I am a Republican. Republican socialism is a huge aspect of the Irish socialist tradition. And one thing that's very important to understand is that I actually agree with James Connolly's assessment that the United States is an aborted republic. At some point, it kind of forgot what a republic is. For God's sake, your president is a monarch. It's you have an elective monarchy. That's what you have.
Well, that's what a republics.
Hey, they got rid of the king. Okay, we had a king, and they subverted him.
You just wanted to have your own.
We had a king. That's for 4 years. We had a king.
we have a Lord Protector, okay? Like the real history of this is that the Americans were like the New Englanders specifically. They were the ones who supported Cromwell. They were like the radical Republicans. Like this is like why we have the presidency. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the presidency. I don't think there's anything wrong with elective monarchy. I'm not really like opposed to unitary executive authority. I actually think part of the problem with America is that there isn't unitary executive authority. Like the executive branch is not the president. The president is very subservient to the rest of the executive branch, which now includes like super crazy extra legal corporations like the CIA, which were created in the 20th century, right? Like that's not traditional American government. Like the CIA isn't in the fucking Constitution. So, well, like
Yeah, I'm just
yeah,
going to
you know?
refer to even just like Celtic Ireland, go back to the system of tanistry before the Normans. I'm never okay with monarchy. It's a key aspect of republicanism. Whenever I hear typically American Republicans bringing up the idea like that, like I'm a republic, not a democracy, or focusing upon the representation, it's a red herring. They've actually fundamentally missed the key defining distinguishing point of why republicanism versus monarchy. It's because first of all, just elephant in the room, republicanism is fucking ancient. A form of republicanism was practiced in Rome, for God's sake, but it was similar to what came out of France. It was a republic for a particular class that had no interest in getting rid of class divisions. Within Ireland, the form of republicanism that came out was formed by James Connolly, a Marxist who synthesized the Irish question in terms of understanding that nationality formed a key material root of the oppression of Irish people, and identified the idea that, and this is fundamentally what republicanism is. It's the idea that a commons has to be commonly owned. A nation is a social system because it belongs to the social aspect of being collaborated and formed by groups of people. It belongs fundamentally to those people. So when I hear a Republican say, oh, we're a republic, not a democracy, I'm kind of like, you're fine with democracy when 51 senators are there. Democracy is just how you form your republic. But a republic fundamentally is, yeah, they're basically fucking, it's they absolutely love the way the US is right now.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not like when I'm talking about Republican, right? I'm using like the oldest possible version where it's like res publica just means like the like property of the public. Like the term in English language tradition is usually commonwealth, right? Like you would have the Commonwealth man in like the 19th century and earlier. And that's what is communism? It's a commonwealth. What is it? It's when the commons own the wealth of the country. It's pretty simple. And when I'm saying monarchy, what I mean is unitary executive authority. I don't mean like, because like there are Republican monarchies in the sense that in a republic you would have like someone elected to be the leader of the republic, like the protector of the Commonwealth, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's normal. That's how it worked even in ancient times, right? Because you would have, it's not like, you'd have like people coming around to argue, debate various things in like their tribes or whatever, if you're talking about the Celtic tradition. But they would also elect someone to represent like them when they had to do a larger
I'm very quickly. I'm just going to pass this over to Faraday. I can get into a conversation about republicanism, monarchism from a Celtic tradition within Republican socialism. It's not what we're here to talk about, but
that's true.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to direct this.
Well, I don't know, Jreg, do you want to say anything before we reframe here?
This all sounds like some off-left gobbledygook.
Well, I did invite the two communists on here. I thought I'd just try to inject that, move the audience a little bit.
I haven't read a book in 3 years. I don't know what the fuck anyone's saying.
Also, I did not bring a Heineken on here on purpose, Don. That was totally by chance, but I'm seeing you guys.
I'm a massive rugby fan, and that is my favorite competition that has ever existed in the history of sport. It's defunct; it doesn't exist anymore, but it'll live on in my heart and soul.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure where I want to go with it from there. I mean, I agree that the politics in the United States is just completely fake.
It's designed to be. I mean, you should read Walter Lippmann on democracy, right? Like, their whole system was set up. They said, Walter Lippmann has this great quote where he says, democracy is too important to be left to the people. So what it really means is it's about public opinion management. And like, what is public opinion? Public opinion is polling. And what is polling? Polling is like the Gallup polling industry. And so this is like why we created the Central Intelligence Agency and all these other things, because you have to poll everyone, all the time on everything. And that's how we that's how the market works. Like that's how we set prices. That's how marketers know how to market goods, is because everyone's getting polled all the time. That's what we have. We have what is really like an experimental research science dominated polity, where like the science military industrial complex put together by like Vannevar Bush during World War II is that's what runs the country. Is like that's why it's like trust the science, right? Like why is it the CDC? Why does the CDC seem to have more executive authority than anyone in the executive branch? Is because that's what we created like a decentralized network of it's called the command and control system, and it was that's like what the internet is. It's a continuity of that same project.
But it seems to happen in such chaos. Like, you know, like
That's what America is, man.
The conspiracy theorists come on here and they're like, they're mind controlling us and they've got complex. Like, I'm telling you, I spent time, like, you know, adjacent to those sorts of those expert fields, right, that are dealing with radicalization and de-radicalization. They don't know how to manage this. It's not like they're carefully, tightly managing the narratives that we see, and no, it's complete chaos. So, like, how is it that the internet's done such a damn good job of keeping everybody still in the dark? Why is it that you can still even go online, you have all the access to the information in the world, you have all these, like, but you still can't, like, it seems like for me, I had to lose my goddamn mind before I was able to sort of break out of that, like, political spectrum mold. Why is it still so damn difficult? Is it just that the framework, the foundation that's been laid is there and people don't, I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense.
They can't see what it is. They don't know what the internet is. To them, the internet is nature. To them, the internet is natural. Like to them, internet relations are natural things, and they're not looking at the media itself, right? They're just being subjected to it, and they're molded by it. And this is how media ecology works in general. Like when like the people who were deeply impacted by television, this also changed radically altered the way people thought of themselves in the world, but they for the most part didn't go like, oh, this is like the television doing this to me. And because like you once you're aware of how things are affecting you, then you can like see that happening. But if you're unaware of this and like you don't know what the internet really is, and like it's just like sort of like magical to you, you know, talk about like meme magic and all these other things, it's this inexplicable thing, then you're subject to it, and you are not you're like in it and of it. You're not in it and not of it. Like you want to be online, but you want to be logged off, like mentally. Like that, you have to be online knowing that the internet is not real, that the internet is effectively hell. Like that is how you should engage with the internet. That's how you should engage with most media. You shouldn't go into it being like, this is all perfectly natural. Like, you know?
So you're captured by the medium, and you're thinking
Yeah,
that because
you're mystified by it.
there's all these different subcultures and there's all these different avenues to explore, but because that everything's mediated by that medium and everything is grown out of that sort of substrate, you're not seeing that, like, no, these are a bunch. And that's why I really like the analogy of an ARG. Like, these are just a bunch of LARPs that just consume your time.
Well, do you want to know where the origin of live action role playing comes from? Because
it comes from
would it surprise you?
It comes from the
Would it surprise
agency.
you to know it was the OSS taking psychoanalysts out of fucking Vienna and doing like Rollenspiele, like fucking RPG, like all RPG progression systems, like Dungeons and Dragons, all of this shit. All of it was developed during World War II. Like, and you're saying it's all chaos and stuff like that, but that was actually extremely useful for us because we were at war with people who had very rationalized central like governing structures that we could infiltrate and totally understand and analyze. Whereas like when the communists and the Nazis and everyone else who's like tries to oppose American hegemony in that time period, when they were trying to figure out what the fuck we were doing, they couldn't, because everything was so compartmentalized and it was literally just the practice of chaos on a global scale. That's all imperialism really is, and piracy. Like they couldn't figure it out because no one could, because
there's no central,
it doesn't function. There's
yeah.
no person who's in charge. There's no sovereignty at all. It's entirely distributed, which is why people feel as if they're taking power when they like, you know, express themselves politically on the internet or something, when effectively they're doing nothing. Effectively, they're not having any power whatsoever. They're totally instrumentalized by this larger network of power, which is the internet itself. They're not. They don't have power. They're feeding it power to that by granting it the power over themselves. And so like all this stuff like radicalization or like, you know, blah, 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 brainwashing, it's all voluntary. It's all voluntary. If you decide like, oh, I can just watch this video and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to like become radical, like then you don't, because if you can see it, then like for what it is, then it's not going to impact you like that. It's only when you're mystified and you're in a case of confusion that you might, you know, subject yourself to like, you know, eliminating yourself and instrumentalizing yourself to this medium.
That is really true. There is a sort of mystifying effect to all these things. So like you know, when I was going down that like alt right rabbit hole, watching all this, there's like this weird like pull. It just keeps pulling. It just keeps pulling you. You know, Jreg, when you're exploring subcultures, do you feel like they're sort of magically pulling you through? And like, have you sort of like gained any insight from going through the different milieus?
No, I've only gained schizophrenia.
Okay. Well, I feel like schizophrenia is a good way to break out of the mold, though. I kind of do have this meta theory that you have to kind of lose your mind before you can really start to question it.
Yeah. So you lose your mind, and then your whole world you deconstructs,
Right.
and then you build it back up, and then you're like, this is the way that it should be. And then you're just, you know, a couple of years later.
Could you explain what you? So you made a video recently about static, living in static. Could you explain what you meant by that?
Noise. It's like
Noise. That's it.
Yeah. It's kind of like. Now imagine like a white noise. Like
Okay.
TV.
It's
Sure.
when you become a nihilist and you start a noise band.
Yeah.
And you create. That's what it is.
You really
Like,
get
it's
into
just hardcore
experimental
nihilism.
music. You're like, yeah, that's more or less it. Well, you know, it's best, you know, either you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, you already know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain it. Think about it.
I think I think I get what you mean by it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think nihilism is just the way that I sum it up, but
That's the main problem. That's the main problem. That is nihilism. It's absolutely nihilism.
No.
Well,
that's the sound of hell. It's just
Well, okay,
perpetual
here's
static.
the thing. Yes, the internet is hell, but also it's real, and it's only getting more real as time goes on, and eventually it'll become more real than reality.
Yes, because that's already happened, but that's because people want that to be the case.
Exactly.
Because the internet, you get everything you desire, you have instantaneously. You want to see big booty bitches, you type that into Google and you got them right there. That's not how reality is supposed to work, but that's how hell works.
Look. No one should say that's not how reality is supposed to work. Okay, that's how I want reality to work. I wanna have the big booty bitches. I want to snap my finger, have them appear right in front of my eyes, and just go numb.
Except that's not the reality.
I think there's something interesting
when you get what you want, you're in hell.
There's something interesting here between the two positions where that's not how life is supposed to work would essentially be the idea we had, say, 3 or 4 decades ago, before instantaneous gratification with the internet, whereas just the conditions we exist within have changed, where that is how the world works, and that can't help with their one country.
I mean, so is it reality everywhere, or is it, or is it just in this geopolitical zone?
No, it doesn't work for the reason I'm mentioning, because it is a change in the material conditions that induce a relationship between you and the actual reality itself. Something has to intervene. And it is that dissonance between not really understanding the intervention or not understanding the change. To use a physics analogy, it's we're resisting. We have a sense of inertia to this social change. We're not quite comfortable with where things are going because social systems like hegemony, I guess is the only word for it. It's kind of embedded and slowly moving. It doesn't adapt really easily. It stagnates. It's why change comes in waves. It's when you just have a critical mass of enough people who have just, I guess, enough will to impart their existence upon the world to change the way that world interacts with those people. But the internet is just too new. So I think a lot of us view it as abnormal. And
it's not that new, though.
No, it really is.
It's like almost 50 years.
Yeah.
What's new? What counts as new?
What we're doing right now, you could not do on the internet 50 years ago.
That's true.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's what I mean. It's the slowly dynamic change of what this technology is and how it's imparting upon us. Hell, 10 years ago, you could barely do what we're doing right now. Watch news footage from 10 years ago and just see how paltry potato camera it is. Technology has just become incredibly, insanely just like high fidelity that's allowed these sorts of conversations. But I think like that, I'm not dismissing what you said, Logo. I do think there is a sense of like resistance holding on to this isn't the way it should work. But I just want to point out the invocation of moralistic language where we're imposing an ought, and that comes from something that's independent of us. And this is where I want to bring about this where I think this is an example of interpolation, where we're taking ownership and we're internalizing a sense of a social system that there's nothing natural about any of this. So to say that it's not the way it's supposed to be is us buying into the system itself.
No, I disagree with that, because you have to proffer like you can't just be a critic. Like being a critic of what exists is not useful. What you have to do is you have to proffer a replacement for it.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're not doing fucking anything. So what I'm saying is, if you don't have an ethical system that you want to impose over and
Right.
against the one that is being imposed upon us now, then you're not doing anything. What
I
you're
agree.
doing
I
is
agree.
you're
Some
endlessly critiquing, and that's hell.
some
Again.
things work best as a critique, but then they don't work in and of themselves. Unlike a good ideology like anarcho-primitivism, we get rid of the internet. We go into tribes. We get spears. We hunt mammoth. I mean, that sounds way better than this internet shit.
I think anarcho-primitivism is the perfect representation of what the internet actually has done. And I think James Joyce like pretty much predicted all of this, right? Because what he was trying to do in Finnegan's Wake was showing that all of this new electric like media was sending us back to pre-modern times. So we're essentially in like pre-literate, we're in like the pre-literate pre-modernity on the internet. So people are reenacting and living in like mythical space, which is why it's called Finnegan's Wake, right? Because like Finnegan is like ancient like Celtic like hero from like pre-Christian times. So
like
that's
that
like
framework.
why. Yeah, so I know Marshall McLuhan, right? He gets this from James Joyce, but he said that like when you're in like we're hunter gatherers of information now, like that, like we are in an anarcho primitivist system right now. It's just a really high tech anarcho primitivism, and people have referred to this as like anarcho tyranny or other things like that. But that's how it works on the internet. The internet is anarchy. The internet is literally like a tribal conflict over land in a way.
Right.
That's
So we're already living in the anti-centrist combination of
we've
the
become monkey.
transhumanism.
Everyone has already. People have already become monkey.
We've already returned to monkey, but we've just done it digitally. Huh? I like that.
Yeah, but it's like a Joe Rogan monkey, though. It's not like it's like some
it's a monkey on DMT.
Yeah, it is. That's an interest. Wait, can you flesh that out? Because I'm trying to understand what you're saying.
Psychedelic monkeys, man.
So you're saying that like basically we've created like a new substrate, a new environment, and now we're kind of like exploring that, and that sent us back, and that sent us back to some primitive roots in a sense. But then also the mythic component that you're saying is that primitive people, we assume that they would have lived in this almost like comic book fiction narrative mythic universe where they would have like guided their lives through this like sort of narrative. What are you trying to say?
What I'm saying is like so I don't know how best to put this in like a short manner, but I would say like so most people what do people posit humanity as now? As a form of animal life, not distinct from really any other form of animal life. So you've got like this Darwinian rationalist interpretation of the whole world where we're all just monkeys, right? Like you're supposed to accept this. Like, in the past, for the most of human history, people weren't like, oh yeah, we're fucking monkeys. We're animals. Like we're not distinct in any way.
Right, even primitive people wouldn't have
No, they wouldn't have, because they would have said we're the sons of gods. That's what they would have said, right? They would have said like they would have had this culture hero ancestor, and most of them would have had a story of like.
I'm just stopping you. That's just not the case. Like research is coming out of Ireland at the moment showing that most of Ireland, there's a theory that it was quite animist. I feel like what you're projecting is a very Christian perspective of the idea of gods themselves as a monotheistic entity. It's in terms of human evolution, it's a very new idea. I just don't think this is the way we've always been. The idea of separation from everything around us, that's very new.
I don't really know what you mean by like what research would prove that the ancient Celts didn't have some sense of a prevailing like god. Like I mean, the Native Americans had a sense of like they had various like intercessionary deities, but there was always a like sort of mono. They called this henotheism, but there's a belief in like a sort of like unnameable absolute god, even above that. Like that's not a new thing. Like this
I'd
is
have to
what.
look into it, but like the university that I was going at, it had a religious studies department that was specifically non-confessional, and one of the key things they put across is the idea that religion itself is a problematic term because it doesn't actually accurately encompass the global understanding of a spiritual concept. Like a really good example, like you mentioned, Indigenous American spirituality, they wouldn't really relate to religion the way we do because we have a separation of the divine from kind of like the mundane and the ordinary realm, where you have to go to a place to experience a sense of divinity. A lot of indigenous tribes, they didn't have that. It was you were constantly immersed in the sense of spirituality around you. No, it's the divinity of a god that we see in a human form is a distinctly like Christian idea that came out of the Roman Empire. I just have to interject with that, like that's a development of just humans as we've interacted with consciousness.
Well, Christ was like a very important figure who sort of reforms the whole cosmos because what Christ did was say that God.
Yeah, but in terms of
the
human animal, that's very new, and you are posing this is just who we are.
Well, I'm saying there is no human animal. The human animal is monkey. Like I'm not an animal. Like maybe.
Yeah, and you were proposing that this is just the way we are, and I'm saying this is very new.
No. I'm saying positing yourself as the human animal is very new.
You had too many people high in openness to experience, and all of our topics are too abstract, and we move laterally too much. We need to go back to the point, probably.
Radicalization.
It's called Dislimited Hangout, okay? We're not supposed to.
I really do think that Christianity is the future, and I think that what we're going through is like we have a time where basically most people are like pantheists, or I would call them pandeists. That's like the belief in like the singularity and the Big Bang and these sorts of things. But it's all based off of this like Darwinian cosmology where everything is just eternal conflict, right? Everything is just this. It's a red in tooth and claw, right? And we create like our human societies, which is just a subset of this greater like bloodbath, which is being in the world, this animal bloodbath. I don't really think of it that way. I think really that this is like a very limiting worldview. It's a very limiting cosmology, and I don't think it actually explains how people actually live in the world. I think that the cosmology in which we are like man is God, like we created gods, like idolizing
concept, yeah.
No, it's not the Nietzschean concept. This is
that's where I know it from then.
That's what I'm saying. This is the problem. Everyone's reading fucking Nietzsche, and Nietzsche is just a radical liberal. And like being a Nietzsche, and you go, "Oh, God is dead," and like death of God. Now we're just truly confronting our like limited position as animals or whatever. This is liberalism. That's what liberalism wants you to think of yourself as, because then you're like a rat in the maze, and you can be studied and probed like anyone, like any animal in a zoo. And this isn't that new either, because the British Empire, they put people in zoos. Like when they put the pygmies in zoos right next to the flora and the fauna. When they found the Aborigines, they classified them as fauna. So looking at people as animals is liberalism.
I kind of get what you're saying. It's kind of irrational.
It is. And it's a game theoretical one, because if you look at like the development and like where does Darwin get this from his cosmology? He gets it from reading Malthus and Bentham and the British utilitarians. Like that's the origins of political economy, is to posit the world as a giant zoo. So this also explains why is Prince Philip one of the lead members of the World Wildlife Fund? Well, because we're the World Wildlife.
Well, okay, so bouncing off what you said that we're a giant zoo. How do we get out of the zoo, man? So like, I feel like we're almost like the topic is why are we radicalizing? But really, I think what meta topic here, the real topic here, how do we radicalize? Right? Because I don't think any of us want to live in this. I'm sick of it. I'm just sick and tired.
Hell's
of it.
bad.
So
find Jesus.
Well then,
I like hell.
Well then, how do you do it? Because if you turn into some black sun worshipping Nazi, all you do is shoot up mosques, go to jail. If you
Yeah.
become a Western leftist, all you do is smash windows and go to jail. If you become
Yeah.
liberal, you just worship hell and you become, the reigners over hell and we live in hell
Yeah.
forever. How do you break out of it? Because you can't
You
even
gotta
posit a
build
position.
you have to build a people's party. You have to build an independent party system that will be the operational structure for the future of society. You have to do this on your local level, at the very basic local level. You first have to like incorporate this into your own thought processes, and then you have to apply it in a real way in your immediate locality. It's not about like, oh, who am I going to vote for in the next
Sure.
presidential election? It's about building up like we need like literally a political revolution to take hold of the entirety of the state and to change it so that it becomes a commonwealth, so that the all of the land and all of the goods and services are owned by the commons. And to do that is going to be a multiple lifespan project. I don't think we'll see it into its fruition, but that's what communism is. Communism is not about getting to utopia. Communism is about participating in the pilgrimage of the generations to the New Jerusalem, which is communism. Because we're not all going to make it. Like, we're not all going to get to make it there. And
You know?
that's one of the things you can see in the mythologies, right? If you look at Chinese, like science fiction, Chinese movies, most of the stories are about how you're participating in a struggle. And at the end, you haven't won. You haven't gained all that was there, but you've made it an incremental step towards like the final position. Whereas in liberalism, all of our stories, if you look at them, look at all the Marvel movies, what it is that we already have accomplished the end of history. And the problem is that there's all these threats that might make us revert back to an earlier form, whereas we already have. This is the best of all possible worlds, right? Like the liberal global market of international uh, market socialism. That is supposed to be the end of history. Like we have the UN, we accomplished the end of history. We just need to like proliferate what's already been accomplished in the 20th century. That was it. That was done. World War II was like the final judgment on the world, and that's just not the case. And that's one of the main problems people have is because the way they cognize themselves is they want to be a part of like the utopian movement, like the utopian moment. Like this is even like the people going in to the White House on 7/7 or whatever. They thought that moment, like Jesus himself was going to come down, like Donald Trump was going to take, like, you know, all the bad people were going to go to the jails and things like this. Like that it was all going to happen instantaneously, like it does
Yeah,
on
the,
the
the
internet.
QAnon millenarian, utopian day where, yeah. But
So so what your choice is to do is be a good person, do good things for the people around you, be deeply involved in like build an actual community. Like don't build an internet community, like be involved in reality on your immediate local area, and you have to like do work that is going to be uncompensated. No one's going to appreciate it, and in fact, you're probably going to be punished and brutalized by people, if not outright crucified. And you know what? This is the whole point of Christianity. That's what Christians tell you. That's what real Christianity is about, is knowing that you are going to be killed by the mob, that like this is, you are like totally trying to destroy the idol. You're going into people's houses, you're taking their idols and you're smashing them. They're not going to like that. They're not going to be happy with you, but you're getting them out of hell.
okay, so maybe I've got the wrong frame here, but from what you're describing to me, that sounds like the physical process. Okay, we go into the zoo, we smash the locks. Obviously, we're not describing utopian millenarian day here, but we over time we smash the locks. But then we
There's no
open the
locks.
door, and the animals,
There's no doors.
well, they
That's what
yeah,
I'm saying, man.
okay, but
People went in on their own accord. They
but we tell
volunteered.
them
They put themselves in it.
but then how do you? But
You have to get them.
you
You
have
tell
to
them
get
that they
them.
can leave.
You have to, yeah, but that's a mindset shift. And so I'm asking,
Exactly.
I guess what I'm getting at is how do we approach a framework that gets people out of this deep inception layer dream state? How do we like turn on that music, kick them in the bathtub, and get them to come up those layers and get back to base reality? Because we are just so deep down in this type of reality of illusion, and it seems like we don't have. You talk to communists or you talk to fascists, and it's like, well, we'll just give them the right ideology. We give them the right ideology, and it'll wake them up. We tell the right story, and it wakes them up. And I'm so soured on that now. But there has to be
Well,
a
it's not about
framework
that.
shift.
And any communist worth their salt will tell you that the whole point is to deconstruct that ideology. It's a false consciousness.
Right.
The whole point is giving people an authentic experience of their the actual existence and understand what their relational position to the world they're in. It's understanding that you are essentially an ATM to a group of people. That's a huge part of understanding this process.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's the way I like to think of it sometimes is we're too busy trying to get the ship down the estuary that we've forgotten to turn on the lighthouse. We need to know where we're going before we can go anywhere. And it touches onto something that Logo said earlier, where he was accusing me of just critiquing things. When no, I'm very aware of this. Is the idea is you need to have a destination in mind. You need to be wanting to construct something. You need to know where you're going. You need to have an idea of what that looks like, and you need to be brave enough and comfortable enough to say, I was raised within a liberal society. I've no clue, nor do I have the ability to know what this society looks like. The whole point is I'm going to be counter-hegemonic enough to create a generation that'll come after me that hopefully will have a better picture of it. The whole point is to progressively move forward, not in this incremental fucking electoral bullshit. The whole point is to be progressively moving, just like the concept of people themselves, into it. I'm actually channeling a Hegelian idea here, but I'm moving it towards an idealized idea of totality, where it's you have to exist as authentically as humanly possible, so that you can actually use your will to bring an idea into the world itself, so that the world can test that idea and then bring it back to you, so you can just do that again. And then through doing this, you end up with you polish a diamond in a way where you get closer and closer to get woo-woo about it, it's closer to what our nature is. The longer we're alive, the better we know ourselves. And I mean that as us, as in the 100 and whatever thousand years of human evolution. The longer we're around, the better we learn to understand ourselves.
I don't think people understand what,
Individual people
you
don't.
know, like you're saying, it's about like living authentically, right? Um, not to like essentialize it down to that point like that. We don't even know how to do that anymore. And the internet is
Yeah.
separating us
Yeah.
from that even like more so. And that's what I look at all these cults, these little ARGs that people play. They just take all the authenticity out of the room and they only give you this aesthetic RPG. You know, I'm not even so sure that I'm broken out of that mold. Right? I can sit here and think that I am, but probably not.
I would say the way forward is creative production, right? I think like what Jreg's doing right below me. I think is some good stuff, because what it does is it portrays like a narrative of this sort of enmeshment or like psychosis in the internet. So it's creating like a drama which then people can like see, and it's like symbolic. It's representative of like their own experiences. I think that's like socialist art, or like what I'd call Republican art, like as William Blake did. I think that's how you actually change things, and this is what Christianity says as well, right? Because Christianity is about the word. Christianity is about the spirit. It is about the poetic. It is about revelations. It's not about creating arguments. You don't argue someone into this position. Like you can do that, but ultimately, like you're brought to in anything a moment of where you have to take the leap of faith, and you can't make someone do that. You can lead someone to the edge where they would have to make that leap, and they will decide for themselves if they want to make it or not, but you can't force them to. And the other thing I'd say is like whenever you're doing anything, understanding and construction are the same process. So like, do I have like a perfect roadmap for how this would be accomplished? Absolutely not, because the roadmap would be constructed by the actual process of attempting to do it over, like, you know what I mean. You can't have like a preordained strategy. Like what you have is a commitment to an end, and then you try to put that into place as a like what's his name down here, as he was saying earlier, right? Like you have to. It's an iterative process, and so what that would mean, for instance, in America, would mean like run your own candidate for your local office. Take it over. If you fail the first time, see why you failed. Do a better job next time. Keep doing it. That's it. That's how everything works.
Yeah, just committing to a process. I like how you put that, and it goes back to the example that Zanzee metaphor he gave is that you're trying to steer the ship, and we don't have a lighthouse. Saying, no, let's
Well,
let's
I've got
look
the
at
lighthouse, baby. I'm holding the light.
let's look at where we want to go, and let's just keep pursuing it, right? And you're not always going to know the exact process you're going to get there, but if you keep focused on steering this damn ship and not looking at the lighthouse, you're never going to.
I would say
Um,
one of the main problems is people have this apocalyptic sense that we're like living in the end of times, and
mhm.
that's definitely like one of the things that I think you should eliminate from your thought process, because that's actually like the justifying structure for what we have now, where we're like, oh, global warming, climate change, like we only have X amount of years, like it's time's running out, like we can't do those things. We have to do like what's pragmatic right now because time's running out. And if you're not going to do what's pragmatic right now because time's running out, like through whatever perfidious means you have to, then then you're not realistic, right? So this is like what happens with all the Democrats and the pseudo leftists who are like, oh, we can't actually try to push to get universal health care in America because if we did that, like it might hurt our electoral chances next time, and then the Republicans will win. And better the devil I know than the devil I don't, or whatever. So this sort of like compromising, this sort of attempt to be pragmatic, is part of the problem itself.
Yeah, I would agree with
There's a
that.
phrase I have: if pragmatism doesn't get you anywhere, you aren't pragmatic. You're just vain.
I like
Yeah, it's
that.
it's kind of rooted in the narcissism, right? Because it's kind of narcissistic to think of yourself as like the last generation or like the last witness to the earth or whatever, and you're like, oh, I don't have to care about like the future or like future generations because there won't be any. Like I am the last witness of the world, so I can do really whatever I want.
It gets to what Hobbes said literally about the privilege of absurdity. Does it really matter if you had the correct political option of like who's the better person to vote for, if the actual outcome itself is totally independent of anything good happening or even anything happening at all? Why are we satisfied with the hypothetical? It's absurd. We live in the world, not our minds.
So far we've kind of identified that people might be radicalizing in the sense that they're smashing windows, they're attacking people in the streets, they're raiding Capitol buildings like it's a World of Warcraft
That
group.
was happening in the '70s too, though, is
They're
what I'm saying.
right. All this stuff's been happening, but in the sense, but no one in the sense is radicalizing in the sense that they're breaking out of this. As logo puts it, the Dante and hell. I call it the political compass matrix. No one. So we've identified that people aren't radicalizing; they're just grouping up into aesthetic cults, right?
They're torturing each other like demons do in hell. Like who torturing each other in hell? It's
That's
themselves. Like
right.
like these people are and they like torturing each other. Like it's fun. Like they get
Sort
off on
of
it.
some BDSM.
Yeah, some
It's
demon.
really
Little bit of
it's really sick shit. Like it's
little bit
really
of
pretty
demon play.
disturbing.
Well, it
Because
is, and
people
you
really
go
do
on
enjoy
Twitter,
doing
and
it.
and you go on Twitter, and you can just see it laid out bare for you. It's
It's the
awful.
spiritual animal kingdom.
Yeah. So we've identified that really they're not radicalizing in a true sense. They're just all trying to be the kings of hell. They're all trying to overthrow the big Satan. So
Like
they
Lil Nas X. Like Lil
yeah
Nas X. That's what the music video is, right? Is he takes out Satan and he becomes the king of hell. And
right.
that's you manifesting your individuality, right?
Little
It's like
Satan
you
becomes
become the
big
king of hell.
Satan. So they're not radicalizing. We've identified that if we were to truly radicalize, what it would mean is to break out of these identity categories, break out of these consumer identities, give up the narcissism, live more authentically, focus more on the process and less on the. You have to see the outcome. You have to have the outcome as an ideal, but you can't become so idealistic that you live in that outcome.
You have to live in it in your mind first. Like
Right.
like like that's what like communism, the revolution happens in your mind. It's not even something that happens in material reality yet. It has to happen in the mind first. Because when you inhabit that revolution in thought, then you start manifesting it in reality. But at first it has to be something in your mind.
Yeah.
You're talking about having it
Gramsci made
have.
this.
You're talking kind of like having that framework like flowing through you, like have that
You
as
have
the
to know that
basis of your being.
you have to know that communism is inevitable and it is going to win.
Instead of having it as this like kind of ideal that you're just always dreaming of and hoping of.
That you're romantically fighting for it,
Right.
and the best thing that could happen is for you to be tragically defeated but to not compromised. And so then you can be like, well, I tried really hard but we failed, and like that's the tragedy of this world, is that the good can never be truly manifest.
But that's the inverse of it, right? That's that kind of toxic like inverse mirror image that just keeps crap. Zon, you were going to say something?
Just two things I want to point out. The first one is arguably the most key takeaway from Marx's thesis on Feuerbach is the idea that the inevitability of communism assumes humans actually fully take control of their agency as historical agents and actually become a material force themselves. In Hegel's Introduction to Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right, he makes the point of saying that weapon as a critique you should never forget that actual critique as weapon itself of being an actual weapon as a group of people themselves and imparting your ideological interpretation of the world upon the world itself, so that you should actually change the world. That is the key point of one of his most famous phrases at the very end of Thesis and Feuerbach, and this is the idea that philosophers have thus far interpreted the world, points to change it. That is the point. Communism is inevitable if people change the world, which is why the point I get at is false consciousness is the most important part, because, and this is the point I want to get into, Gramsci lays out exactly what Logo was talking about in terms of you need to have a war for position and a war of maneuver, where what you first need to do is you need to identify the actual hegemony of your society itself, understand the social systems, understand the ways that the superstructure is imparted upon people's identities and how that then reinforces the base around you. You need to understand the way things are, and then you need to not be that. Once you've created a genuine proletarian culture, a proletarian counterculture, which would be trying to live authentically, you then engage in a war for maneuver, where what you do is you impose that will upon the state itself and break that hegemony, so that you can, in a way, exactly what Logo's done is you perform revolution, where what you do is you fundamentally change the relationship of classes to society. You have to do this both internally and externally, but the point is you can't do this individually. That is the key aspect. It needs to be a communal activity. And just the thing that I would say to suppose, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and communal meaning like not like, oh, me and my Discord server are changing reality by raiding this Twitch stream and writing the N word or whatever. Like that's not like, this isn't going to be a like internet movement. Like it'll be one that exists in reality. Like it's not going to be organized on the internet, is what I'm saying. Like
the way I put it sometimes is the internet is not dissimilar from a bus. It's a great way of getting people together, but it doesn't actually talk to people.
Unless you're in the magic school bus. Actually, I forget how that one worked. I assume there was a talking bus in there.
I encourage, I don't think this is what you're doing, but I encourage people not to dismiss the revolutionary potential of the internet itself, because it's the equivalent to what newspaper and radio has always been. It's a form of dissemination. It's like agitation propaganda takes place really effectively.
I think the only difference now, I think the only difference now with the internet as opposed to the printing press or any of those other technologies is people, they identify with the ecosystem of the internet as the real. You know, it has become like, as Baudelaire put it, the hyper reality.
Well, that's what happened with the books. That's what happened with books, because
how did that happen? Books don't hyperlink together and create little ecosystems.
Yeah, they do. That's what the Bible
they're
does.
called citations.
Okay, but you know what I'm saying. You don't live in an ecosystem of books. You can't hop from book Discord server to book Discord. Or break it down for me.
You're in a community when you're reading a book. You're communing with the person who wrote the book and everyone else who's ever read the book. Like that is its own community, you know. Like reading is not an antisocial or individualist act. Like reading a book is a deep engagement with the spirit of mankind in its entirety. Like that's why being like so trapped in like a presentist mode of production, I guess, and like being only engaged with internet content or something like that, you're never going to actually be able to understand internet content if you don't have the grounding of the rest of humanity. Like, because what is all of this collection of like old books? That is the commons. Like that itself is like the library itself is like sort of a model for what communism is, because like that is the collection of all of the works of people in time becoming the collective ownership, the collectively owned by all of us. Like no one owns any of these old books because everyone does.
There's a phrase that I heard that I absolutely adore, and that is, what is inside your public library has brought down every dictatorship in history.
So what a way for me to conceptualize it is the internet's just added bandwidth. Would that be a way to think about it?
It's more lanes on the highway, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
But-
It's
the
just
problem with
it's
the internet is when we talk about the internet, it's not one medium, because the internet itself, like the ecosystem of the internet, has changed multiple times in my own lifetime, right? Like we could say like social media is like internet 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0,
right.
whatever
Sure.
whatever point oh they're on. So all of these things work very differently. Like the media ecosystem of tons of small forums and like blog spots and whatever, like GeoCities pages, was a very different type of internet. I mean, even MySpace is a very different type of internet from what Facebook was. They function totally differently, and that is a that does change like your the way you engage with it. It changes your thought process. Like for instance, on MySpace, everything was customizable. Like everything on your page, like you could HTML code it in its entirety. It was sort of this notion that it was your private web page, you owned it, and it was connected to other people's web pages. But that's not how it works once you get to like Facebook and things like that. What it is like you're taking out like a classified ad basically in the phone book for yourself. And that's not really the same thing as like being able to design it in any way possible. You're now provided a specific rubric of where you list your likes and where your photos go and things like that. That wasn't the case with the early internet. The early internet was actually far more free, and it was far more of a medium for creative expression than it's become now. So what we're seeing right now actually is like the internet is the sad thing is that internet activism, or like the attempt to preserve the good in the internet, has totally failed because people who are devoted to the internet are totally distracted by like electoral blah 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 blah. Whereas right now, what are we seeing? We're seeing Twitch purposefully leaking their own code base or whatever. Facebook going down again, I think purposefully, at the same time that they have one of their own employees going to 60 Minutes, because what they want to do is they want to create like a compliance department for social media so that there won't be any challenges to the prevailing social media networks that already exist, because you'll have to be compliant to the new social media czar. And that's the goal, is to completely enclose the commons. And that's been happening on the internet. The digital commons that we once had in the glory days of piracy, where everything was on archive.org, that's gone already.
Yeah.
That was taken away from. I've been blowing the whistle on this for a long time, but no one really cares, because the only people who really care about that are people like me who care about this stuff, right? Like I'm the one who's impacted when I can't go to archive.org and read all the books that I want, because now they're artificially limited. Like capitalism is actually imposing itself over the internet space in a way that didn't 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago in some respects. The internet is not becoming a domain for more freedom. It is becoming worse, and it is becoming more hellish, and it is because of capitalism and liberalism.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all old enough in the past 10. Pressing. Um, so so we've identified like where people are stuck at. We've identified how you authentic, break outside of that. Identified some of but in terms of some of the ideological, leading people away from it. I don't know if you would. I think it's more of a narrative, breaking the narrative, and I think I like the way that you put it, Logo, and that's where my mindset has been lately. Expressing that through art to get people out of sorts of mindsets that they're in now. And I do like that about your work, Jreg, is that defining, like, kind of like putting a mirror up to the internet and defining it as like a schizo zone where nothing's real, and it doesn't matter if I go from Sonnen Rad, Naz Bowlery to Ann Prim, and then maybe I'll combine the two, and then I'll also become a cat boy. Like you've kind of like blurred all these things together.
Catboy Nazprim, that's a good one. Yeah.
Catboy Nazprim. Well, it does because because when you just start to jumble them all together, you kind of are like, I take this seriously? Does this mean anything? And I was just, I do kind of wonder when I watch your work how aware you are of that, but that project really is kind of breaking the hyper reality. It's like poking a hole in the matrix and be like, it's all just basically the thing.
Right. The key thing that what attracts me to Jreg's work is because it's nonsensical. It's
right.
It's absurdist in its purity. I love it, and I think one of the things for me is I've no idea what you are. and I'm more comfortable that way because I'm fundamentally in my soul I'm an existentialist. When Sartre said that or no sacre to use the French, that essence precedes existence, I fundamentally believe him, and I think I have to go in like 5 minutes, so I'll just try to wrap this up. There's one thing that I think Jreg's work deprives people of, and that's meaning. And I actually think that's incredibly healthy because Faraday, you asked the question earlier in terms of like that like what led me down a rabbit hole, what took me on this like weird journey into like so many different places that eventually resulted in the deconstruction of your own mind. And it's literally just one word, and it's meaning. You were looking for something, and it gets at what I was saying earlier. One of the things that radicalization requires, it's like to use a social class, there's what I consider a transitionary class. It's totally socialist, not economic. It's the idea that people between stages have a porous sense of identity where they don't quite know who they are. And those people are searching for meaning because it's uncomfortable to exist and not know why you exist. Like the quote that I leave you on is, it's a Sartre quote, where that freedom is realizing that you were born into a world that doesn't care about you, yet you're responsible and you didn't ask for that liability. Freedom is being aware that this sucks, so you look for meaning to make that bearable. For a long time, we found that in religion, and this is where I get at the Nietzsche quote, where what's often misunderstood is the whole God is dead and we've killed him. They forget the rest of that paragraph, which is essentially how we are now standing over the corpse of the thing we have killed, and we are totally absolving ourselves of the responsibility of taking on the liability of being responsible for our own meaning. We're looking for meaning in the world. That's fundamentally, I think, part of what this is, and it's something deprived to us. This is, for me, the great revelation Marx had, and that it's our society is purpose built to keep people alienated because you're a more efficient worker if you don't feel plugged into your society. So you go, I said this on Twitter, and I think this perfectly sums this up. Hating BreadTube gives you the sense of community capitalism alienates you from. Fundamentally, we're just looking to belong. And like, if I was to ask you, what were you looking for? I don't think you could tell me, but the alt-right had an answer for you.
It all has an answer. And Zan, we'll just wrap up here, everybody together in just a couple minutes. If on, it's all the same thing. It's like when and that's why a big reason I had my mental breakdown like 6 months ago is when I popped out of that, like, bread tube bubble, I was pissed. Is I didn't just go, I've seen this happen to Peter Coffin and Angie Speaks, where they're now over here with Amy Therese, and they're all like just hating on the bread tubers, and now they've just become the inverse of the inverse, and it's like this like weird, like, okay, you went from being Mario to Wario, great job, and now you're Waluigi. Like it's never gonna end.
Trail. That's a well-trod trail.
Yeah,
there's a key thing I want to point into.
The neoconservatives are Trotskyites.
Right.
Like, no one talks about this, but that's how the neocons exist. They're all post leftists who, like, that's where all the alt-right guys came from too. Most of them were involved in like leftist or anarchist circles specifically, and it was when they specifically were like when they started instituting like privilege checks and like this sort of thing, that like a lot of guys who were involved in Occupy Wall Street were the founders of Identity Europa. So that's all a continuity. Like, this isn't that strange at all.
Logo, here's the thing. I wasn't being led by any sort of propaganda because I wasn't listening to Peter, Angie, or Therese or any of these post-leftists, right? But as soon as I popped out of the bread tube, Demsock, whatever bubble, that is immediately where my mindset went. It immediately went to that post-left place. That wasn't a place that I was led to through watching videos or reading. My mind naturally fucking went that direction. It is literally like, as you describe, it's a predictable ideological pipeline and path.
Yeah,
and
that's why I'm saying like I like what you're doing down here, Irish guy with the Heineken cup thing. But I think you are still too plugged into basically the standard curricula of like the academia. So like, how much Hegel have you read? Probably not that much. You probably read more Marx than Hegel. How much of the Bible have you read? I doubt you probably read the entire thing. But you know,
I'm
Nietzsche,
Irish,
you
and
know,
you're asking me how Christian.
Let's not get too
I-
down
I'm
this rabbit hole
sorry,
because we
that
have
is
to
the
hop
most
off here
ridiculous thing
because
I've
That's not
ever
what
I
heard.
think the next
That's not what I asked. You're Catholic. You're Catholic, so of course you don't read the Bible.
the next
Well,
three
what
is
are
going to
you,
be a
Protestant?
debate between you two.
Have you
I've
read the
a fair
Bible?
I've read a fair chunk of it.
The
Yeah.
whole thing? Have you read the whole thing?
God, no, nobody's read the whole thing.
I have.
What
Why
are you
can't
doing
you?
with your life?
I'm having a great time. I'm reading the greatest literature like ever written by anyone in the history of the cosmos. What are you doing? Reading Sartre?
No.
We're gonna have to can this debate that's cropping up. You have to end, but I think that we've basically laid out the groundwork of like where people are in terms of this radicalization. I don't know if anybody has a word that they'd rather like put in place of
Just psychosis. You
psychosis.
could
I
instead
like
of
that.
calling it radicalization, you should just call it psychosis.
Let's
Yeah.
call it
That's what it
based.
is.
How about
As
based?
long, as long as people understand it's a process and not an event.
Right. And so I think we've like pretty much laid out the groundwork of where we're at and where we need to go. I like the work that you're doing, Jreg, to kind of show that it's all a wild psychosis circus. Logo, you're doing good work to write on this, and Don, I appreciate your inputs on it too. Even if you read tube in the Twitch politics space.
I hate that space.
I
so
hate
much.
those people. So yeah, does anybody have any like? I guess does anybody have any closing thoughts they want to give, and then we'll go around and let y'all plug your stuff. No, we all feel good. Okay, so
Yeah.
Don, do you want to plug any of your stuff or say anything?
Just Google Zanzee, you'll find me.
Okay, Logo.
You're
you
muted.
muted
Check
yourself.
out my stuff. Oh, I did I?
Yeah, do you just
Hello?
go ahead. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Logo Daedalus on Twitter. I have a podcast called Read Books Unlimited, where we read books and unlimited amounts of them.
Okay, Jreg.
Faraday. You gotta. You're gonna search around. You're gonna be blind, and you're gonna find this thing, and you're gonna grasp onto it, and you're gonna hold onto it like you're in a rapid, like you're falling down a stream, and you think you found the rock that'll hold on. And it doesn't matter if it's the rock. You just gotta hold. Just use your strength. Just hold on. And look up Jreg, Jreg, on Google. Yeah,
Awesome.
or wherever.
There is no meaning here, folks. All right, guys. Thank you for coming on. I had a lot of fun. See everybody, and see you next one. Faraday out.
Ciao.
Not about it. Bye bye.